Welcome to another edition of Pleading Business TV. I'm David Luke, Vice President of Two Maids and a Mop, and with me as always is
Ron Holt, CEO and founder of Two Maids and a Mop. So we're going to take you back a few months ago when we actually brought in franchise owners within our company and company-owned managers that manage our company-owned locations. We brought them all together for what we call the annual retreat. It's our third annual retreat. So during this particular weekend of events, one of the things we had was a series of lectures from experts in all sorts of different fields, from leadership to employee motivation to even salesmanship. So our franchise owners and our managers said, hey, guys, the speeches and presentations were so amazing that you need to share this with the world. Sure. People would really want to hear these things because it's going to really help them. So we said, you know what, we should do that. So we're actually going to take you live here, or not live, I should say, but we're going to take you there here in a second so you can hear some of that exciting speech. So, David, who's our first talk?
Yeah, the first one we're going to introduce is Deborah Dietzler. She did a great talk on leadership. She's actually the former Director of Alumni Relations at the University of Georgia, now currently Director of Alumni Relations at the University of Louisville. And she did a great talk on leadership for us, and we just want to share that with you right now.
So take it away, Deborah.
So I start off with the desire to make people happy, but I often need to adapt and adjust to the situation at hand in order to achieve the best result. The only constant we have in business, and in fact the whole world, is change, but there are some characteristics that need to remain consistent even through change. And so we'll spend our time together here examining those characteristics that I feel have been most critical throughout my career. So I'm going to throw, I'm not a big fan of the PowerPoint. I'm not even the hugest fan of the flip chart, but I will write flexibility up here so that we know that one is one I think is really, really important. And, it'll break up me standing there and talking to you the whole time, like podium. I think everyone is a leader in some form or fashion, even if you're only a leader of yourself. Everyone has leadership qualities, and I might argue that everyone has leadership potential, but that would get us off on a very long tangent. 10 years ago, I was president of the Junior League of Athens because I don't know how to say no to any sort of interesting volunteer opportunity. And in that role, I had the ability to attend a couple of national conferences, and there were always discussions on leadership. So there was this one speaker who talked about leadership in a way that I hadn't heard of before, or in fact since, but I use this analogy quite often, and please forgive me. In first grade, when we had to do pictures with our spelling words, I always failed the picture part. I got the spelling right, but the picture never good. So this speaker came up and said, when you talk about the word leadership, it's a compound word, leader and ship. And so you're riffing off there on your elementary school English with compound words. But she said, leadership is about being the leadership. This is supposed to be a ship. It probably looks more like a boat. This is the ocean, in case you didn't get that part. And so it's about being the leadership, the ship that other ships follow. And I thought, okay, that's really kind of an interesting analogy. So it's important to chart the proper course. So if you're the leadership, what's next? Well, I found a great quote from Admiral Grace Hooper, and I'm a lover of quotes too. And she said, a ship in port is safe, but that's not what ships are built for. Sail out to sea and do new things. And I love that. I'm going to use that one a lot now. One of the first important things you need to do is surround yourself by those who are on the same mission as you. That does not mean put together a team of clones, but it does mean everybody needs to be on the same mission. And you'll probably hear me say that about 4 or 5 times. You'll probably hear advice, especially, I would imagine in your business as well. Hire for attitude, train for skills. And that advice definitely has its value. Unless you need members of your team to possess certain core skills, you do need that, but ultimately you need some people who are called subject matter experts, or I've heard it called SMEs, because those people have very particular talents. And so you need some of those people probably more in the areas like finance, because you don't want someone handling your books that doesn't have a good sense of accounting and things. But for a lot of other things, it is important first to look for attitude, especially if you're in the kind of business where it would not be as difficult to train for the skills. But the critical aspect in all of that is make sure that you are all on the same mission. I did spend a little time on your website, and I have a general sense of the company's mission. I may have overlooked the overall mission statement because the internet connection at my mother-in-law's home in Hendersonville, North Carolina was abysmal. And my husband happens to be an IT professional, and when we were there for the last 10 or 12 days, I said to him, I think it is really sinful that you have allowed your mother to exist in this substandard internet situation. I can't believe you could not figure this out. And he's just, I don't know what's going on. He actually called the provider to come to the house and try to figure it out. I was like, this is really pathetic. I'm firing you. But anyway, I'm not saying that you must have a mission statement, but if you do, you need to make sure that it is repeatable, you make sure that it is memorable, and you make sure to communicate it clearly and often, because it is a very important part of sustaining your company's culture. Has anybody here read the Jim Collins book, Good to Great? Look at this, Good to Great People. I'm going to admit, I have not read the book. But I have heard about it often enough through the years to know that one of the main ideas in that book is that idea of getting the right people in the right seats on the bus. So if you prefer a bus analogy to a ship analogy, maybe that one will stick with you. But as an aside, and you can see now why I shared with you what I shared in the beginning, there is no way that any mere mortal could keep up with the pace of publishing in the business world. But I advise you to take time for that kind of professional development in a way that makes sense for you. There are a couple of companies that provide summaries of the latest books. They're often advertised in airline magazines, which is a little cheesy, but that's really where you find the best advertisements on that. One of the companies is called summary.com, and they also have audio available. And I'm a very big fan of using time in the car for learning. And so I started to think about that in the context of your company and wondering, I'm sure that after you finished and you're driving to the next place, maybe it's nicer to just decompress and visit socially, but maybe that's something you want to think about is, doing some learning in the car. I also subscribe to Success Magazine, and each one of those magazines has a CD, which I know is also old school technology. But I love those CDs because there's like 3 or 4 interviews that the publisher does with the people who are the features in the magazine, and I get many, many good ideas from those CDs. I pass them on to everybody at the office. And the bad part is, of course, I'm driving and I shouldn't be writing while I'm driving, but it's all worked out so far. And then I'm also a really big fan of the New York Times Corner Office column on Sundays. It's in the business section on page 2 at the top. And they ask the same 5 or 6 questions of every executive they interview, and usually it starts off with, what's your leadership style, or what's the first example of leadership? It asks, they usually conclude with a question on how do you interview, what do you look for in interviewing? And here again, I've saved them all in a big 3-ring binder. The information is wildly contradictory, but sometimes I pull out an interesting question or an interesting idea that I then start incorporating into my interviewing. I'm like, oh, I've never thought to ask that question. That might get me to a different bit of information. So that's another thing I really like. So these are just a few ways to get the gist of the latest hot topics in business in an easily digestible format, because I can assure you these authors, they know how to fill pages. And I think that for a busy working professional, it's better to spend your time on the key takeaways, because I could have told you, oh yeah, I read Good to Great. The big idea there is, have a big, hairy, audacious goal, get the right people in the right seats on the bus, and you'd believe that, oh yeah, she probably knows everything about Jim Collins and Good to Great. I have the book, but I've not read the book. Once you've surrounded yourself by people who are on the same mission as you, I think one of the next most important leadership aspects is to communicate those core values or ideals that are consistent regardless. And that's another really important aspect of creating culture. For me, those things are like, first and foremost, we're going to go away from my leadership. If my sister happens to come down here, she's going to laugh so hard at this because she's an architect. And so she is also a really good artist, and she'll be like, that's ships. Oh my gosh. And then she would whip out some beautiful ocean liners in no time flat. We each have our strengths, She's a SME, I'm a SME, we're each a SME. And then we have a baby sister we really boss around. Loyalty. Loyalty, there is no substitute for loyalty. If you cannot be loyal to this organization, you do not belong here. If you cannot be loyal to your coworkers, to your team members, you don't belong here. And for me, that kind of loyalty is manifested in things like staying away from gossip. And when I figure out how to do that, I'm going to write a book and contribute to that overpublication in business book culture. I want people to take their problems and their issues, if they have them with coworkers, I want them to be adult professionals. I want them to work together and be respectful and try to work these things out, rather than creating a culture of gossip, creating toxicity, or going right to the supervisor with. And I work with a lot of women also. Alumni relations is a profession that is loaded down with women. And nothing frustrates me more than, I don't like the tone of that email she sent me. I didn't like the way she talked to me. I'm like, I am not Miss Mary Ann on Romper Room, which may be a reference that is a little too old for some of you. But be an adult, be a professional. And I'm not very comfortable talking about my achievements, but I assure you, I did not get to be the alumni director at the University of Georgia at 36 years old, not having gone to Georgia, being the first female to hold that job, by engaging in that kind of activity. It's not professional. Work it out. You're not going to love everybody that you work with. It's a great bonus if you do, but more often than not, that's not the case. Focus on the job at hand. Be a professional. I don't often say that part to people every day, but I think it often because, it's not how I got where I was. I've had people who haven't liked me. I've had people who've backstabbed me. I just keep focused on my work, the mission at hand, and I don't get down to that level. It's not a good place to be. On the positive side of loyalty, I also encourage you to look for opportunities to promote your organization every day. My first day at Georgia, the business school dean happened to be in the building, and the first thing he said to me, which has stuck with me all these years, is make a new friend for your organization every day. It can mean a whole lot of different things, but think about that. How do you make a new friend for two maids and a mop every day? So when you start with these kinds of lists, flexibility, loyalty, you end up with lots of words that are not direct synonyms, but the ideas are generally the same. And I think it said somewhere in my bio, my BA is in English, so you've now noticed about 3 references back to English. But they have some similarity in definition and expression for leadership purposes. So loyalty is a word, love the word loyalty, but I also like the word integrity. And I feel like integrity, it's sort of like loyalty in a way, but it's different. It's different than loyalty. Integrity, I could also use the word ethics. I could also use the word character. Because I'm trying to get to the same general idea, and it alludes to some of what I just said. Be a good person. Be a person of your word. Demonstrate impeccable character. I think Henry James, again, English reference, wrote about dealing with people in all circumstances. Be kind, be kind, be kind. And here's another thing you're going to hear me say a couple of times. Hold yourself to a high standard. Hold those around you to a high standard. Very, very important. Excellence, never negotiable. I earned my master's at Texas A&M, as Ron revealed to you, and that was a life-changing experience for me. Again, that could be a whole nother tangent. At A&M, there's an honor code. Imbued from the minute you get there, it's very much a part of everything, and it's Aggies do not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate among them those that do. Now, does everybody follow that to the letter? Probably not. But I really liked that. I liked being part of a culture, a part of an organization that felt so strongly about this, that it's written, that it's repeated, that it's just part of the general, air you breathe there in College Station, Texas. And I was raised with those kinds of values. Other speakers and I were talking in the back of the room. My father is of German descent. He's first generation American. He was a Marine and he was a police officer. So there was no room to get in any kind of trouble because the wrath of my father, who had a gun, not that I expected he was going to shoot me, certainly was enough to keep me on the straight and narrow. But we didn't have a Dietzler family honor code, but I certainly felt when I got to A&M that this was a place that really reflected the kinds of values that were very much a part of my upbringing. And they were very much, like I said, written, repeated, and part of the culture. Another related characteristic I like is respect. I think I just alluded to respect a few times. I consider this one, very, very essential, kind of like the be kind, be kind, be kind. It is closely related to everything we discussed, but I think it's a concept that also needs its own moment in the sun. It needs to be said out loud. I think that the golden rule is one of those things that's a really perfect starting point for respect. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So when you're in doubt, ask yourself, am I the person the way I'd like to be treated, in this circumstance? I think it's a very good benchmark. Anybody out here in a Rotary Club at all? I'm a Rotarian, and they've got this, they too have encapsulated their values into these 4 key questions. They call it the 4-way test, and you recite it at every single meeting, and it's the 4-way test of the things we think, say, or do. The first is it the truth? The second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? So as a Rotarian, they say, if you find yourself in some sort of a quagmire, these are a few quick tests, that you can apply to the action or the decision at hand. So something to think about. And my former boss at Georgia, he had some good advice in this regard as well. He would tell me, if you think it, don't say it, and if you say it, don't write it down. In terms of, if it's something that's questionable like that, you might want to ask yourself before that all happens. So, it's often a lot easier to stand up here and say those kinds of things, but I think at the end of the day, you'll never go wrong if you really stay true to yourself, be a kind person. The world is just getting more, again, we talked a few minutes in the back, just people are losing class and respect for each other and politeness. I mean, I don't know how many of you, I hope it was nobody here, but I don't know how many of you heard a lot of noise in the hallways at about 4 o'clock this morning, and you're just like, oh my gosh. And I've been traveling for 22 years, and it used to be that I couldn't, something like that happened, it would be a rare occurrence for me to say, oh my gosh, you just won't believe. I stayed at a hotel last night at 4 o'clock this morning. There was so much noise in the hallway. Now it's like every time I stay at a hotel, there's noise in the hallway in the middle of the night. It's just, people have just become incredibly, as you were saying, selfie. It's just total self-culture. So if it feels good to me, I'm just going to do it. And I don't know that that's really, in fact, I'm certain that's not really a good expression of leadership. So I'd just offer up some of those thoughts and how you judge when you're faced with questions. The next thing, this is my big thing, is passion. I am all about the passion. And passion is a major force in my life. I believe that if something is worth doing, it is generally worth doing with great passion. This does not apply to things like laundry, dishes, and admittedly, I do have somebody who comes and takes care of my house because that just does not excite me. I'm very busy. I have other things I'd rather do. I am thrilled. I have told you I wish you would start a franchise in Athens, Georgia, because Ron was telling me, and I haven't been doing a great job of coming back, he was telling me some of the criticisms of your field: unprofessional, poor organization, lack of trust, no accountability, little to no communication. So I have an independent lady, and I know you all know that's probably like I've got all kinds of insurance issues with just paying this woman, whatever. My issue, and it's funny you say all this, my issue with her is I feel like she's charging me too much for what she's actually doing. And when I come home, like sometimes there's just stuff not done. And then I'm very frustrated because it's like, what did she do here? I mean, it was clear this needed to be done. And then, my husband's like, well, call her. I'm like, I don't want to call her up. Why don't you call her? Which he's never going to do, because you want to talk about a person who is the anti-me. He does not want to talk. He does not want conflict. And he certainly does not want to deal with that problem. He's like, well, then you deal with it. I'm like, I don't want to deal with it. So then it doesn't get dealt with, and I clean down the cobwebs, and I'm muttering under my breath. So at some point, we'll get back to these. If not, we'll certainly talk about them in the roundtable discussions. But, passion, definitely have a lot of passion for what you're doing. Passion is manifested in a lot of different ways. I am a very high energy extrovert. I know this is very surprising information to you. So for me, when you're dealing with me, it is very obvious that I am very passionate and very excited. But there are other people who are equally passionate about things, but they're quieter people. So there may be some people on your team who are very passionate, but they're not manifesting it in my crazy, like my hands are flying around way. So be aware that teasing out passion, it can take time with different personalities. I said, you're not always going to have somebody like me who's it's clear. You can just tell, because genuine passion, it really can't be faked. And when you're with a person, again, like a high energy extrovert person, it's like a magnetic force. There's an energy, there's a connection, and you're like, I want to be a part of that. So regardless of whether they're going to express it in my insane way or perhaps a little quieter, more tempered way, calm, consistent passion. If you're not passionate about what we do, then I don't think that you're going to have a great time on my team. If you're not passionate about excellence, I probably don't want you on my team because, like I said to you earlier, for me, excellence is never negotiable. I'm a perfectionist, but I realize that that is just not an achievable goal at all times. So you strive for perfection, but you settle for excellence, and excellence is never negotiable.
Hopefully you enjoyed that talk on leadership, as it was very informative and beneficial to us, and hopefully it was beneficial to you as well. Again, thanks for joining us here on Cleaning Business TV, and we hope to see you next week.
See you again.